You're listening to From the Chair, and I'm your host, Mike Hamilton. Join us each episode as we talk to athletic directors from across America. We're going to talk about topics like leadership, career development, issues of the day, and I can promise you we're going to have some fun along the way too. So sit back, listen in, and let's dive in. Let's go. Welcome back in. This week's episode is Jeremy McClain. Jeremy's the athletic director at Southern Miss University. Jeremy, I really appreciate you taking the time to spend some time with us today.
Mike, I appreciate the opportunity, man. It's an honor to be on, and I have had the opportunity to watch these and think it's a great thing, and especially during kind of what is a very interesting time in our industry. So appreciate you giving me the opportunity to be on.
That's for certain, and we're going to talk a little bit about that in a few minutes. I think I told you we're going to, off the top though, I want to kind of sort of introduce you to some of your colleagues that know you, but maybe they don't know your full story, because I think you've got a really interesting story as it leads to becoming an athletic director. And we'll talk a little bit about that as we go over the next few minutes, but it probably all starts back in Houlka, Mississippi, right? And, or I think it's New Houlka, but it's referred to as Houlka. So yeah, tell us a little bit about growing up in a small town in Mississippi and coming out there to go play baseball at Delta State.
Yeah, Mike, I know you've been doing your research because you know the difference between Old Houlka and New Houlka, Mississippi. But grew up in Houlka, Mississippi, as you said, small town in North Mississippi, and a town of about 800 people. And so when I say small, I mean small. And it was actually, I think, the perfect way to grow up. It was a great opportunity. You know, I grew up either rodeoing, riding horses, or playing ball. Those were the options. And so my parents didn't want me to be in trouble, and so my brothers and I, that's what we did. And it was a great town to do those things in, a town that really means a lot to me, a lot of great people there. And so got an opportunity out of high school there to play baseball at Delta State. And really at the time was it such a small community that not a lot of people before me had a lot of opportunities, and so just very thankful to get that exposure. And Delta State took a little bit of a chance on me, so went and played baseball at Delta State, and had a very fun career there. Played baseball a little while after college, and then got out in the corporate world. Wanted to put my MBA to use, but athletics and college athletics in general just kind of called me back onto campus, and so that was kind of the progress and the step to getting me to the place where I was back engaged with college athletics.
Yeah, and I want to take some interim steps along the way if I could. Thinking about the fact, growing up in a town of 800, and I know baseball is interesting. You've got high school baseball, and then you've got travel league baseball. I don't know if you had access to any of that, but there are student athletes today at the high school level that are playing in small schools. I mean, I grew up in a small community myself, and in Western North Carolina in the mountains, and I know of guys that I played with, or guys that I know of that were, at high schools that didn't have, more than a few hundred, and I felt like, hey, these guys can really get it done. They just don't get the recognition. So if let's say that there are prospective student athletes watching this, which there might be as this gets out into the marketplace, how do you make sure that when you're coming from a small town, I mean, look, your athletic prowess probably got you to Delta State, right? Your success in baseball, but it's short of just your success. What are the lessons learned as to how you get your personal brand out as you're growing as an athlete?
Yeah, and I think that's a great question, and I think that's changed over time, Mike. Right? So when I was growing up, no, we didn't have travel baseball, and but what we did have, we played American Legion summer baseball, and that was kind of our avenue to be seen. The one thing for me, I was probably never the most talented person on any team I ever played on, to be honest with you, and so I played with a lot of talented people who didn't get the same opportunities. One of the things that I would say, and I think young people these days have better access to this and probably understand this better, but don't be afraid to get outside of your comfort zone and go and do things and be around people. I think what really happened for me is I had the opportunity to begin to play with other players who I thought were really, really good, and they were getting scouted and having opportunities to sign professional contracts out of high school and go into a lot of the SEC schools in baseball. And I didn't know that I could compete with them, coming from a small school, but putting myself in that position to compete with the big boys, quote unquote, and having success and gaining that confidence was really what allowed me to kind of break through what was maybe a little bit of a mental barrier or a ceiling, so to speak, being from a small town. And so I would challenge young people to put yourself in a position where you push your limits and you get out of your comfort zone, and there's only way to figure out how good you can be is to find that point where someone stops you. And so getting outside your comfort zone and pushing yourself and playing with great competition and just exposing yourself to different things, I think is the name of the game.
Well, and I think that's informative to some of your success you have now, and again, your track record for becoming an AD at a young age. So you were an All-American at Delta State, and were you drafted or signed as free agent? I can't remember. I know you played
Yeah,
professionally.
actually, so it's interesting. I actually, to answer your question, I was signed as a free agent, but I was a fifth year guy. So again, small town kid, got redshirted, didn't get to play my first year. But since I was a fifth year senior, I actually signed with the Red Sox after my last college game. So before the draft, I actually went ahead and signed a free agent contract and went ahead and got into the system a few weeks early there with the Red Sox and went to extended spring training. So signed as a free agent, really about a week after my last college game, which happened to be about middle of May.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so you played 5 years in the minors, and then you, as you said earlier, you got your MBA and entered the insurance business, right? So what was
Right.
that time frame between leaving baseball and then when you ultimately came back to campus there at Delta State?
It was about a 3 year time frame, and so I was fortunate enough, worked for a great company, had some great upside, some great opportunities there with what I was doing. Stayed in Mississippi, so I was around. My territory was Delta State, and some of the northern part of Mississippi, and so had an opportunity to stay in touch with people. But that was about a 3 year period, and just kind of something was missing for me, in my life, to be honest with you. And so, like I said, really felt called to be back on a college campus, and was very fortunate that I had the opportunity to go back to Delta State into the development role for the university. That's kind of how I got back re-engaged with the university. And really up until that point had not thought a lot about being an athletic director, but as I got back on campus and began to think about a path, I think it very quickly became obvious that that was something that may align with my skill set and my desires was to be an athletic director someday. That got sped up on me a little bit. I'm happy to talk about that in a few, but that was kind of how I got back on campus, and very, very blessed that there were people there at Delta State that wanted to give me an opportunity and thought enough of me to put me in that position.
Yeah, so that I do want to talk about that. That's the next place I'm going with this, because I know what I know from reading what I've read, but you lived it. And the idea of you coming back to Delta State, working in university development, and then Brad Teague, who many of us in this industry know and have known for a long time, leaves
Yeah.
to go to Central Arkansas very soon after you get there. And you've got no direct administration experience in athletics. You've got fundraising, you've been a student athlete, and you're at your alma mater, and you're 30 years old, and now all of a sudden, in very short order, you become the athletic director. What the heck? Tell us a little bit
Yeah,
about that.
that's kind of how I felt too. It was so when I got back on campus in development, one of the first things I did was I went to Brad's office and I said, hey, and he had played baseball at Delta State, and so we didn't play together, but we knew each other and had a lot of mutual friends. And so I went and sat down in his office as soon as I got back on campus and picking his brain a little bit. And I just told him, I said, man, I really would like to be sitting in your seat someday. Want to try to figure out how to get there. And I didn't literally mean his seat. But about 4 months later, Brad had the opportunity at Central Arkansas, and so the job opened up. And so, I've been on campus for just a few months, and really was nervous about. It's what I wanted to do. I probably wasn't ready. I wasn't ready. But you never know when that opportunity is going to come along. So I threw my name in the ring, and was very fortunate that again, my skill set, being a student athlete, having run my own business for a few years, being in development, and then really just knowing people on that campus who they took a chance on me, because there were people on that campus who saw me as a student athlete. They saw the leadership ability that I showed as a student athlete, and so they really took a chance on me, and gave me an opportunity to learn on the job. And so I tell my student athletes all the time when we have this discussion, you never know who's watching. And so my time as a student athlete, had it not gone the way it did, um, that opportunity, I wouldn't have been in a position for people to take a chance on me because they believed in me because they saw me as a student athlete. So I had the opportunity, like you said, at the age of 30 to take over there at Delta State, and I was very, very fortunate. So in case, someone's listening, they haven't connected the dots. My first day to work in an athletic department, I was the athletic director. Do not advise that for anyone as a career path. And I joke about that all the time. That's not how I suggest you do it. And so there was a lot to learn in a very short order, in a very short period of time. I was fortunate that we had great coaches. We had, some really good coaches in some key positions on our campus, some really important sports at Delta State. And so they were really good to me as I got my feet under me, very supportive of me, had a really good staff who had been there. And so a lot of pieces just began to fall into place, and we ended up having a lot of success. But very unusual path in that regard, but wouldn't trade it for anything.
Yeah. So, question on that front. So you again, as a successful student athlete, and you've been there, and you know the school, and you've said you've had good people around you. But I'm sure, given some of your career track prior to that and everything, you thought you sort of probably could figure it out, right? But what was the biggest sort of punch in the gut, punch in the face when you actually showed up and you start getting your feet wet in the job? What would you say was your greatest learning lesson? I guess you would say from that time at Delta State.
Probably the most immediate thing is that people expect you to have the answer, right?
Yeah.
Because you're sitting in that chair. Even if you don't know, you haven't been through it yet, you don't know it. Once you sit in that chair, people expect you to have the answer. And so being able to say, I don't have the answer, but I'm going to help figure this out was a big learning process for me. And so that was I think one of the most immediate things was that, and what you say as an athletic director, again, because you're sitting in the chair, people take that and run with it. So if be careful what you say, because some people will take it as the gospel, as this is how it is. And so those are some of the things early on that I had to learn. And I one of the most to this day, one of the most difficult things I've ever dealt with as an athletic director. And there's no script for this, obviously, and no book to help you prepare for this. But we lost 3 student athletes in about 2 different incidents in about a 30-day period, and just very, very unfortunate situations, and having to deal with that and understand the grieving process for everyone involved, and trying to lead during that was still one of the most difficult things that I've ever had to deal with. And it's an unfortunate part of the job, but those were some things kind of right out of the gate that just kind of slapped me in the face, and you realize just how big the job can be.
There's definitely no script for that kind of thing. I mean, we had student athletes that passed. We had suicide attempts, mental health lapses, abuse, so many things you deal with that maybe the public doesn't really see. When student athletes put on those uniforms and head out onto the courts of competition or the fields, and those are true learning lessons, that we go through. So I'm going to speed this up a little bit after this next question, back to your time now at Southern Miss, but I do think it's interesting. So you're at your alma mater, you're the athletic director, and you decide, hey, you know what, I'm going to take a fork in the road here and do something a little different. And you left to become the deputy AD at Southern Miss, and I don't know if there were previous connections at Southern Miss, or obviously you're a Mississippian, and Southern Miss was actually going through some turmoil and change during that time, if I recall correctly. But the decision to sort of step out of the AD role and move to a deputy AD role at a D1. I mean, I think I can probably craft what that story is, but I'd like to hear what led to your decision.
Yeah, and that was tough because you only get one opportunity at your alma mater, and I love Delta State, and it had meant so much to me. But I had been there almost 6 years and really felt like, okay, if I want to see, the competitor in me, if I want to see just, how far I can take this, what I can do, I'm probably going to have to make a decision here to make maybe a lateral move or just a very strategic move to get into Division One. And so I did not have any strong connections at Southern Miss. I had watched Southern Miss growing up in the state of Mississippi, and watched them over the years, level of success, the respect that they had. And so they were going through some turmoil and some change. And that was really the reason I got the opportunity, quite honestly. Having been an athletic director, I think they wanted someone who had been in the chair and who could offer some day-to-day help. And so that's one of the reasons I got the opportunity to come to Southern Miss as the deputy AD. And it was a great opportunity. It really, like I said, gave me a path into Division One. It was a few years of turmoil, which probably gave me a decade of experience in just a couple of years, which was valuable to me. It wasn't easy, but it was valuable. And so that was kind of the thought process behind that, Mike, was really just kind of getting in the door and trying to position myself to be an FBS AD someday, and trying to learn from that. And fortunately, that worked out.
Yeah, yeah. So you're there for 3 years or so. You head to Troy next as the athletic director. So you get your FBS opportunity. You're in Troy for 4 years, and then you get the call back to Southern Miss about 2.5 years ago, and so now you're back in Hattiesburg. And I want to talk about kind of where the university is now and your next moves in alignment. But one of the things I was thinking about as I was looking at your time at Troy and now at Southern Miss, you've had the opportunity to hire two head football coaches, one at each institution, and I'm sure quite a few other coaches. And and you, so I'm just curious, what are you looking for? It doesn't have to be in football specifically, but Jeremy McClain, when you're in the marketplace and you're looking to hire, both on the coach front and the team that you have around you, what are the things that you're looking for to surround yourself with and to lead the different areas, programs, or administrative areas as you make those kinds of hires?
Yeah, and Mike, you know this. Each situation is a little bit different, especially when you're talking about coaching hires. Where the program is positioned, are we in a rebuild? Are we trying to maintain momentum? But for me, and whether it's staff or whatever the case may be, I'm a big culture person and believe that there is great strength in creating the right culture. And so for us, it's about how people handle themselves, how they treat others. That will always be at the top of the list for me. And are there times when I probably missed on that? Yeah, there are, but it definitely is always something we're trying to evaluate. And I just don't think you can replace that with anything else. I don't think experience in a certain place or competitiveness or whatever the case may be doesn't replace people's ability to treat people the right way and to create an environment that can reach its full potential. Because you can be successful in a toxic environment. People have done it. It's just not sustainable. And it's also not worth it. And that's what I always go back to, is that what we do at the end of the day is about our student athletes, and it always should be, always will be. And so if we can't get the right people on our staff that can treat their peers, their coworkers, and our student athletes in the way they need to be treated, then I don't want them to be a part of anything I'm associated with. So that's always going to be at the top of the list. And then you begin to look at, upside potential. What is that experience? How does it fit with what you're doing? Where do you see this? Again, it depends on where you're at. We're talking about hiring coaches. Do they have? We when I got to Southern Miss and we had to hire Todd Monken here in 2013. Soon after I got here, Todd. One of the things that appealed to me about Todd was that I knew he was going to be. He had a serious rebuild in front of him, and I knew he was tough enough to handle it. And so it always depends on where you're at and what the circumstances are. And so, but again, for me, it's always going to be about culture and trying to create the right atmosphere, because I just think that if you're going to reach your full potential, that has to be the number one priority.
Yeah. We can take this conversation in a lot of directions, but I think I would be not doing my job if I didn't talk about realignment, particularly with the what the fall is shaped up to look like, and in particular, your most recent announcement of your move to the Sun Belt. And I think, I take a step back and I look at the Sun Belt, and the Sun Belt has had some success along the way, much just as Conference USA has too, by the way. Not to diminish the success in that league either, but I think it's going to be really interesting to see the rivalries develop in the Sun Belt across all sports. But I think the football part of this equation is really interesting to me, and baseball is really interesting to me,
Yeah.
and I'm sure as it is to you, given your background. And so for Southern Miss, you're in a good league. You decide to make a move to another good league. What's the genesis behind that, and sort of what do we expect next out of Southern Miss as you make the move?
Yeah, it's been an interesting couple of months and definitely a few weeks. And I told somebody the other day, well, this will be a great case study in 5 or 10 years on what's happened over the last few weeks and kind of where this ends up. And once we look back, for all of us, not just for Southern Miss. But I think the thing about the Sun Belt, number one, I had a unique perspective because I had spent 4 years in the league, and it was really a very important 4 years for the league from the standpoint of there was a lot of growth that happened during that time, and there's a lot of people that deserve credit for that. Carl Benson, former commissioner, the CEOs, the ADs that were there at the time, and I think Keith Gill is doing a fantastic job as commissioner now and doing some really, really good things. So 4 years in that league of seeing it grow, especially on the football side, I kind of had a sense of what the programs were about, what the strengths were, again, decisions that have been made from a membership standpoint, from a media rights standpoint, and the level of alignment that was in place. So, but as we looked at where we were from a Southern Miss perspective, I think for me, I firmly believe that creating regional rivalries is something that we're missing in college athletics right now. The rivalries where fans can travel and you can fill up stadiums and you can just create that sense of competitiveness that we've kind of lost our way a little bit in that regard. I see a lot of games on television with a lot of empty stadiums and teams that are traveling 1,500 miles to play each other. And I just don't think that's what's best for college athletics. And so we had an opportunity to quote unquote fix some of that for us, which was to put ourselves in a situation where we maybe had one bus trip and move into a conference where we could have 5 or 6 bus trips and create those kind of rivalries. So that was really big to me. I think the exposure, the agreement with ESPN that the Sun Belt had was really important as far as exposure is concerned, whether it be linear television or whether it be kind of where we're heading from a streaming standpoint. I think they are well positioned as a league to take advantage of that. And then, there is some cost savings involved. We go back to the travel piece and what that looks like as far as rivalries are concerned, but the travel cost and the time spent, not spent in airports for our student athletes, I think is very, very important. And then we think about the baseball and the softball, the diamond sports, which are really important on our campus and in our part of the country. How good that league has a chance to be. It was already very good in both of those sports. And if you add Southern Miss and Old Dominion, and then you add, and again, I'm not going to speculate on folks that haven't made announcements, but there's potential to even strengthen the softball league even more. And they had 4 teams go to the NCAA tournament last year. So just kind of from a competitiveness standpoint, it began to make a lot of sense too, along with the other things I mentioned. So as we work through it and we're careful about studying it, we just got to a point where it just made too much sense not to pull the trigger.
Yeah, that's great. Now, so the official move is 23. Is that correct?
That's right. Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Your fans are excited, I would assume.
They are. It's Mike, and it's when you make these decisions, right, you're prepared for some people to be on both sides of the fence, which is natural. That kind of comes with the territory. But really, it has been 99% positive for us. People are very, very excited. Our student athletes are excited. Coaches are excited. It's just been overwhelmingly positive, even more than I could have imagined. And so, not only is it a good move for us, but I think it's created a level of momentum for us, and maybe even a refresh, if you will. It's probably not the right term, but it's what comes to mind of just, hey, we got a chance to kind of come out of the gate here and add to this value of the Sun Belt and kind of get a new jumping off point. And I think that's been really good for us too.
Yeah. So this is kind of a softball question in some respects. I was thinking about, um, you know, the craziness in our world in the last 2 years, the pandemic, political and racial and social unrest, which is more acute on college campuses a lot of times, NIL, um, conference realignment, as we've discussed here, any number of things. There are a lot of things that are sort of seemingly taking arrow shots at college athletics. But there's a reason that you're on campus, and there's a reason that you get up and do this job every day. And while we don't know each other well yet, I think I know enough about you and your makeup to know that there's something there of substance that says, hey, this is why I like to get up and do this, whether it's your competitive nature or whatever. What is it that inspires you as to where college athletics is and can go in the face of all this other craziness that we see in the marketplace today?
Yeah, that's a softball question, but it is a deep one for me, and it goes back to what we discussed about kind of my beginning as a kid from a small town who didn't have a lot growing up, and college athletics gave me an opportunity to experience and explore things that I could have never dreamed about, and so that platform that college athletics creates, and I was a Division II student athlete, but it doesn't matter. Division III, NAI, it doesn't matter. The platform that's created, the work ethic, the ability to learn to function in difficult situations, the toughness that it requires, all the things that college athletics does for the individual and teaches them to be team players and grow. And so I don't know of another job, Mike, that gives us a platform to have a level of impact that we can have on young people. And we sometimes get distracted by a lot of the things you mentioned, right? And some of them are very important. But our end goal, it never changes. It shouldn't change. And I think those of us who want to do it for the right reasons, it doesn't change. And so the path might be different. There are obstacles that kind of get in the way, but the goal line doesn't really change. And that is when our student athletes leave us, they're as prepared as they can possibly be to go on and be successful, and not just as athletes, but as mothers and fathers and brothers and citizens and business owners and whatever the case may be. And so I just don't think there's a greater platform in our society than what college athletics is. Such a critical time for these young people, and we should be doing all we can to make sure that we lead them from being a freshman to walking away from us and being prepared to be successful. And so you talked about some of the things, especially that happened over the last couple of years, just from a social awareness standpoint, social issues that are pulling at us. Those are all, and is heightened on college campuses, and that's because it's a place where you should learn, and those types of things are really, really important for us all as individuals, but it's such a great opportunity for us just to continue to grow as people. And so for me, it doesn't matter where I'm at, or whether it's Division I, Division II, or junior college, the opportunity we're afforded to get up every day and do this and have an impact, I will never take for granted. And that's why I do it.
That's great. Look, check the box. I'm right with you for sure. So winding down here for just a second, I haven't grown up in the South. I've been in and around Mississippi for a long time, and it's known for a lot of great things. I mean, great athletes, great cooking, unbelievable culture, outdoor activity. The beach in the South, and the pine forests of the North, and Delta blues, and all that kind of stuff. I did ask you offline, and you didn't comment for sure on this, but are you a fan of the blues? I mean, do you follow blues music?
I do. And I won't say I sit around and listen to the blues all the time, but it's hard to be from Mississippi and not have, an affinity for the blues. And it's such a huge part of who we are. And I love the state of Mississippi. I love the people of the state of Mississippi. And so that definitely includes the blues and the level of history. This is the birthplace of the blues, and especially the Mississippi Delta, where I've spent a lot of my life and significant years. And so, yeah, it means a lot to me and is very important to our history for sure.
Well, I will tell you, if you haven't read a book called Dispatches from Pluto, it's by a guy named Richard Grant. I don't know if you've heard about it or read it, for everybody listening to this, it's I think he was a New York Times reporter and he moved to the Delta, and it's a great book about the Mississippi Delta.
Yeah, there's no place on this planet like the Mississippi Delta, and people can take that however they want to. And some people would say they love it, and some people would say they never want to go back, and I get that. But it is a wonderful place filled with wonderful people, and it's just such an interesting place. And my wife and I both are Delta State grads, and I've just spent a lot of time there. We love it, and but if you love if you ever have interest in the blues, that's a place you need to spend some time, because there's actually a Delta Blues Trail throughout the state of Mississippi that, kind of all these points in history of impacts on blues, but therefore on music in general, right? And so it's just it's amazing to think about such a small place having such a huge impact on the music we listen to today.
Yeah, I tell you, I'll make a really long story, a very short story. My wife was out in our neighborhood one day when we first moved in here in Nashville, and she's this guy comes by and they're talking, and he introduces himself, and I was out of town, and she calls me and she said, "Hey, I met this guy today. Interesting story. I don't know if you ever heard of him. Apparently he's a musician. His name's Kevin Moore." And I'm like, "Hey, you know who that is? That's Kev Moe. He's like a 5-time Grammy Award winner in the blues, right?" So
that's right. That's great.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you this:
one of the
I want to put in a plug. I want to put in a plug here for my alma mater in Cleveland, Mississippi. The only Grammy museum outside of Los Angeles is in Cleveland, Mississippi. It was built about 5 years ago, and so that tells you how important music is, or how important the Delta has been to music. And so it's a great place, and a very cool thing to happen there to Cleveland, Mississippi.
Yeah. Hey, man, well, this has been a great conversation. We could do a Jeremy McClain part 2, and maybe we will someday. I really thank you for joining me.
Oh, Mike, I appreciate the opportunity, man. I appreciate what you do, and we our industry's a little bit crazy right now, so I think it's great to be able to have all of us share and be able to experience some of that. I learned. Hope this helps somebody, but I've learned a whole lot more than I could give back in this situation. So really appreciate you, Mike.
Thanks again. You've been listening From the Chair with Southern Miss Athletic Director Jeremy McClain. I'm your host, Mike Hamilton. Wherever you listen to your podcast, please go and download and subscribe to this podcast. You can also watch it on YouTube. We'll see you next time. Have a good week.